All right. I'm with Francis Foster, everybody. Welcome back to Walk-Ins. Welcome. It's so good to see you.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Bridget. It really is. When was the last time we saw each other in the flesh?
When you were in Austin, I believe it was
Yeah.
not too long ago. We were in the green room.
Yeah, we were. We were in the green. Yeah, it was April, I think.
You were on your American tour.
Yeah. That was the one before the one we did. So yeah, that would have been April time. It would have
Yeah.
been April time. I bet Austin's beautiful now, isn't it?
No,
Oh,
it was more recent than that. April.
oh, was
It
it? Or
was
maybe no. It would have been November. It would have been November then.
yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it
yeah.
wasn't that long ago. You seemed like you were in good spirits, and you and Constantine were interviewing like crazy, and trigonometry is blowing up, which is exciting to see.
Yeah. 33 interviews, 3.5 weeks. Four different cities, three different states, three different time zones. Yeah, it was kind of wild.
That's so crazy. It's you have a production team that goes with you, right?
Yeah,
Okay, and they set everything up and make sure it all looks pretty, and
yeah,
who
yeah.
does the location scouting? There are some cool locations for those interviews.
That was our guest booker, Billy. Billy's great.
Okay.
Big shout out to Billy. And he booked some amazing places. When I walked in, I was like, Billy, this is amazing. How much is it fucking costing? But yeah,
Worth
yeah,
it
it was.
though. It
Yeah, it
looks
was.
pretty.
Yeah, it was. It was. There was one series of interviews that we did in LA where it was outside with the LA landscape and
Yeah.
just beneath us, which was incredible. Thank God it didn't rain, because if it rained, the entire location would be useless.
Oh, yeah. It's been raining a lot there lately too.
Yeah, but
You guys just missed it.
thank the Lord, the weather held and it was great. It was really, really,
Yeah, I
really good.
saw some of those shots. It looked beautiful.
Yeah.
Truly spectacular.
My
I do
white
miss it.
Irish skin was not yeah, it was taking
It's
a beating.
it's it's funny how much stronger the Irish in you is than the Venezuelan.
Yeah,
Even your genes have been colonized.
absolutely. The Venezuelans don't stand a chance against the Irish. Listen, the Irish, look, this is what happens. Irish just bleaches everything. You know that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know
I
that.
have Italian in me, and I can get a tan, which is good, but I immediately just go back to Irish white.
See, I can't really get a tan. It takes me a lot
Mm.
to get a tan. Like people go to me like, "Are you sure you're half Venezuelan?" I'm like, "Dude, why the fuck would I make that up? Why would I make that up?" You know? But anyway, so yeah.
Where were you when you found out about Maduro being napped?
It was I woke up. It was Saturday morning and I picked up my phone, already breaking my first rule of New Year's that I was going to have a phone, not going to have a phone in the bedroom. I was not going to doom scroll in bed. You know, all the little lies you fucking tell yourself that,
Yeah,
this,
yeah, I told myself exactly those same 2 lies.
yeah, I was like, yeah, this is the new me. Nobody's going to recognize you, Francis. Anyway, so lying in bed, eating a croissant. I wasn't eating a croissant, and then just doom scrolling. And then I went on the newspaper, the Times of London, and I just saw what happened with Maduro, and I couldn't believe it, because you got to understand, for people like me who've got family in Venezuela, my mum's Venezuelan, but more pertinently for the people living there, this has been 27 years. 27 years of a dictatorship in which there's been no freedom of speech, in which people, if you even criticize the government, you get arrested, you get put in prison, you get tortured, or even maybe killed as well. This
Mm,
is an authoritarian regime of the most awful kind, because at least with some authoritarian regimes, all right, you get no freedom of speech, you can't protest, but at least it's safe. You know what I mean?
right.
It's safe. You know, there's no crime. You can leave your door open, and then that's kind of the agreement, as it were. You didn't even get that in Venezuela. Venezuela was a kidnap, ironically for Maduro, kidnap capital of the world, and it's
Yeah.
also the murder capital of the world. So Venezuelans didn't even have an autocratic leader who kept them safe. It was the exact opposite of it. So they were literally the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, it's gotta be so do you still have family there?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've
Okay,
got family
your
there.
grandparents are there, right?
No, no, no. My grandparents have passed away now, but I've got
Okay.
cousins there. I've got friends there. And yeah, it's been a wild time because on the one hand you've got the celebration of finally, as one of my friends said, he said to me, Francis, I never thought I'd live to see the day where I see that bastard in shackles. Number one, so you've got that, but also number two, you've got the uncertainty, as in nobody knows what's going
Yeah.
to happen now. And then you've got the leader, who the current leader, who's a woman called Delcy Rodriguez, and she's an interesting person because she isn't like a centrist Democrat. This is somebody who was very high up in the party. Her
Yeah.
father was a literal left-wing terrorist, communist terrorist. So she has the blood of communism and this hardline ideology running through her veins. She is not what you would interpret to be a nice or decent or run-of-the-mill politician. This is an extremist. And now that there's stories coming out of Caracas, and what my friend was telling me, so they're effectively in lockdown. The only way
Mhm.
that you can go out of your house is if you are work a job which is essential for you to be in the office, or you need to buy groceries, or you need to buy gas. Those are pretty much it. And if you go out on the streets and you don't have your papers, your passport, your ID card, whatever it is, you're going to be in serious trouble. And there's also now reports that the government is now going around knocking door to door, arresting Trump supporters. I guess the
Yeah.
joke is it's pretty much like California, but you know what I mean.
It's so fun or the UK.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you're like, "I can't make that joke."
Yeah, you can make the joke. Come on.
No, you can't. We they're called the collectivos, is that what it is?
Yeah.
These are the
Everybody.
people that are
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it's colectivos. Everybody always has a go at me because I speak Spanish. So yeah, they get
mhm,
colectivos. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
colectivos. The warmth of the colectivos.
Yeah. And so the colectivos, for people who aren't quite aware, they're essentially Maduro's armed thugs. They're hired thugs. So what will happen is, I remember, I mean, it's a horrible story, but my friend was telling me that he went on a demonstration, peaceful demonstration against Maduro. This was around about 2015, 2016. And what the colectivos do is they shoot indiscriminately at protesters. They intimidate them, people who are seen to be enemies of the regime. And one of my friends went on a demonstration. He was walking as part of the demonstration, and there was a kid in front of him who was 17 years old, and all of a sudden there was loud banging, the sound of gunshots. Everyone panicked, turned round. The colectivos were just shooting indiscriminately at the crowd. And my friend turned round and he said he saw the kid in front of him. He'd just been hit in the voice box, and his literal voice box had been blown out. And he
Ugh,
said to me the words, it stays with me for these words will always stay with me. He went, Francis, he died like a fish. Like the way that the fish
uh,
dies, it's exactly it. And it was just nobody could do anything. This 17-year-old kid who'd done nothing wrong. All he'd done was attend a protest, a peaceful demonstration to voice a dissatisfaction against an authoritarian communist regime, and he lost his life. It's like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of this in Iran at the moment as well,
Hmm.
where a
Yeah.
lot of young people are losing their lives, and I just always try to comprehend the kind of bravery that it takes to do that, knowing that you very well could. I just don't feel like we this is something that I've just been reflecting on a lot in the past few days, seeing a lot of the kind of I don't know if they're paid, all of these, you've probably seen the videos of the
Mm.
protesters and the Venezuelans saying like they don't even speak Spanish, they don't know what they're talking about the, Western white saviors out on the streets protesting this. And I just think a lot about how they cannot really comprehend the existential fight for survival in the way that Venezuelans or Iranians or people in many other different countries can.
That's completely accurate. Unless you have lived under that type of regime, you can you can empathize and you can put yourselves in their shoes to a degree, but you don't really understand what it's like. I remember my one of my relatives was president of the Bank of Venezuela, and when Chavez came to power, he's one of his first things that he did was that he intimidated my relative, and he was saying to him, "You've got to give me the gold reserves of Venezuela." And my relative Jose Luis said to him, "Presidente, you can't have those gold reserves. They don't belong to you. They belong to Venezuela. They belong to this country. They don't belong to you." He then goes on his chat show called Hola Presidente. And at the time, what he would do is he would go on his show and he would take over literally every single channel of the TV. Just imagine you go on TV, you turn on channel one, there's Hola Presidente, channel two,
Yeah.
Hola Presidente, channel three, on every single one. And he said the words Diego Luis fuera, which means Diego Luis, get out. My relative was then put under house arrest. He wasn't a young guy at the time. He was in his like late 60s, and effectively forced him to hand over the gold reserves. These are the kind of people that you were dealing with. The people who are utterly unscrupulous, who are completely sociopathic, who all they cared about was enriching themselves, even if it meant throwing the rest of the nation into abject misery and poverty.
Yeah, you tell a story in one of your pieces about how you had a Venezuelan friend who was robbed by Venezuelan police officers. What did that moment clarify for you about the state?
Well, so there's a term called anarcho tyranny. And what anarcho tyranny means is that you live under a tyrannical regime, but the society that you are living is anarchic. There is complete chaos.
Yeah,
And this story of my friend Ricardo really sums it up. So he went to the bank. This was about 10, 15 years ago. He went to a cash point. He went to take some money out of a cash point, and as he was putting the number in the cash point, he felt a gun in the small of his back, and there was a voice. There was a voice from a man who said, "Don't fuck around. You are going to take as much money out of the cash point as you can. If you mess around in any shape or form, I am going to shoot and I'm going to put a bullet through your spine, and you're never going to walk again." My friend was like, "Okay, all right, all right, okay. Well, this is what it is. This is Venezuela. This is Caracas. This is unfortunately standard." So he took the cash out, turned round, and it was a cop dressed in full uniform. He took the money, put it in his pocket, walked round to his cop car where his partner was sitting. They got into the car and drove off.
so crazy.
That's the level of corruption you're dealing with in Venezuela.
Is anyone supportive of Maduro? Are the only people who are supportive on the take? Are there people who are just, think that this is a great, like, idea?
I mean, my uncle supports him, but my uncle's a retard. So like there will always be people who support the regime. There will always be people, but the vast majority of people, you've got to remember, like we've got 9 million people now living abroad.
Yeah.
9 million, and there was
How
always go for it.
how many people are in Venezuela?
At the moment, I don't know. I don't know that amount. We always kind of hovered around 25, 26 million. But at the moment, I simply don't know how many people are there. But 9 million is the official estimate of how many people have actually left. So
28.
it's so
Maggie's
it's a,
saying 28.
yeah. So it's around a third. So it's around a third of the country has left,
Wow.
has physically left. So and the reason for that is not only the security situation, not only is it the autocratic regime, but it's also the fact that we have inflation, an inflation rate Many times it hits 200%. So the currency is completely worthless.
Yep.
Also, as well, life expectancy is lower than Syria.
Wow.
And the only countries that are more economically, how to put this, crippled than we are, one of the few of them is Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what you're seeing with Venezuela is a country that has the largest oil reserves in the world, that is incredibly rich in gold, natural gas, natural minerals. This really should be Saudi Arabia. This should
Mhm.
be, it should be even richer than Saudi Arabia. But because of the regime, because of the communist regime, what you effectively have is one of the poorest countries in the world. There's one very famous economist who, Harvard economist, whose name escapes me now, and he compared Venezuela to a life raft. He said, to not to a life raft, to a life jacket. He said Venezuela is so rich that actually it's impossible to sink it. It's like a life jacket. Wherever you put it,
Mhm.
it's going to float. He goes, the only way it sinks is if you literally force it down under the water. And that's what we have. We have a government literally forcing it down underneath the water to enrich themselves because they don't care about Venezuelans and they don't care about anything apart from lining their own pockets.
What's your kind of gut reaction to what's going on right now? How do you feel today?
Okay, so
I know this
it's,
can change by the time this even launches, so I will
yeah,
say that it is what day is it? The 6th? The 7th? This is January 7th, 2026, just
okay.
so everyone knows.
I am incredibly hesitant. I'm incredibly worried, and I'll tell you why. I'm very happy that Maduro is no longer in power, that he's no longer in charge. That can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing. However, we don't know where this goes from here. Delcy Rodriguez, like I said before, she is very much of Maduro's ilk. She is very much a person of her party. She was with him right the way through when he was committing his atrocities, the tortures, the kidnaps, the murders. This is not, like I said before, a Democrat or a run-of-the-mill politician. They are currently going around Caracas, other big cities, rounding up Trump supporters, rounding up los enemigos de la revolución, the enemies of the revolution. So you are not getting somebody who looks like they are interested in taking Venezuela and turning it into a more democratic, open country. If
Mhm.
anything, it looks like they're doubling down. And the worry for a lot of Venezuelans is just maybe Trump doesn't care. Maybe the only thing Trump really cares about is the oil and the money. And if they just open it up and they get pumping, and then that's kind of the deal that Venezuela and Trump come to, then maybe that's what all he cares about. And maybe if things aren't going to get any better for the Venezuelans. That's the real worry. That's a real concern. The other option is maybe something happens. Maybe there is a coup. Maybe then we have a power vacuum. And a power
Right.
vacuum is even more dangerous than an autocratic regime because then you run the risk of civil war. So at the moment, I understand why people are celebrating. Of course, the fact that Maduro is no longer in charge is a cause for celebration. And his wife, by the way, and I'll touch on his wife in a second. But for the ordinary Venezuelan, these are very, very scary times. You probably saw footage on Saturday morning of Venezuelans, flags, Venezuelan t-shirts, dancing, celebrating. That footage didn't come from Venezuela itself.
Yeah, it was all the people all over the world, right? The 9,000,000 you were talking about.
Yeah. Venezuelans in Caracas and every other city were locked in their flats and their houses, terrified because they simply didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. I can't imagine how crazy that would be. I mean, I was thinking about this a lot when I was in Prague because it was like the 90s that the last Russian tanks were kind of rolling out. They were gone before that, but they were still around. And our guide was talking about how he had to learn Russian history, the Russian version of history. And then when it all fell and they were liberated and he had to relearn history, I'm like, that is so crazy and mind boggling to even comprehend living through. And I feel like Venezuela is going through not the exact same thing, but a similar moment where they've lived. What was it like there before like 27, 28 years ago?
So Venezuela 27, 28 years ago was an incredibly wealthy country. But because of years of corruption and mismanagement, what you actually had was you had a middle class, you had an upper class, but you had a very, very poor, desperately poor working class. I wouldn't even call them working class. I'd say a lot of people living in poverty.
Mhm.
And there was very little social mobility. And that's the reason Chavez got elected, is
Right.
because populism happens because people are dissatisfied with the status quo, where they see politician after politician enter the halls of power and make no real changes, even though they promise that they're going to do things, make no real changes, and life was getting worse and harder for the ordinary Venezuelan. Now, it's nothing compared to what it is now, but there was a real anger and dissatisfaction about because of the way the politicians and the presidents have behaved. Being president of Venezuela was seen as a glorified way to get into power, line your pockets, steal as much money as you could, and then move to Costa Rica or some other country where you could live your last days in the lap of luxury.
Right.
And people were sick of it, and they had every right to be. And then you had Chavez come in, who had his populist, left wing populist slogans and mantras and whatever, all the rest of it promising that Venezuela was going to see a better time. It was going to be fairer. There was going to be redistribution of wealth. And the people bought it.
Right.
And here we are.
Guys, getting older sucks. That's why it's so important to take care of yourself and pay attention to your health. This is something a lot of men ignore, and it is so important. If you hate going to the doctor and dealing with the hassle, we've got the perfect solution for you. With Quest Health's line of tests for men, you can order a multitude of men's health panel tests that keep you informed about your health. You can check your testosterone levels, get a prostate screening, a colorectal screening, or take their comprehensive men's health profile test for a more complete picture of your health and wellness. Purchase lab tests online, visit a nearby Quest Diagnostics location for a sample collection, no doctor's visit required, or get immediate results at home with at-home test kits. Your results are delivered online, quickly, and discreetly. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code WALKINS25 to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALKINS25 for 25% off. Link in the description below. So what were you going to say about Maduro's wife before we lose that thread?
Yeah, so Maduro is interesting with Maduro's wife. So it's connected to Maduro himself, Nicolás Maduro. Nicolás Maduro came to power in 2013. 2013, he came to power because Chavez was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. And on his deathbed, Chavez nominated Maduro. He didn't nominate some other members of the party who were seen as more charismatic, intelligent, politically astute, competent. He nominated Maduro because Maduro was prized not for any of those qualities. In fact, he's incredibly mediocre in most of those traits, but because he was seen as loyal. He was seen as a party man. He was seen as somebody who would follow orders. He was a bus driver, like very regular guy, not particularly bright academically. He was in a rock band, all of these kind of things. And then he entered the corridors of power. And because he was remorseless, he was cruel, he would act out orders without questioning. he was seen as the most loyal of the loyal. He then got married to his present wife, and she is seen as very much of the brains of the operation. In fact, many
Mm.
people have referred to her as actually the Lady Macbeth of Venezuela. She was a politician herself, and she was actually more authoritarian, more cruel. A lot of the tortures and a lot of the murders are seen to come not from Maduro himself, but from his wife, which
Wow.
is why both of them were taken, not just Nicolás Maduro, his wife as well. And actually, in Venezuela, there's a good argument to be made. She is even more hated than Nicholas himself. Because you look at, there's been clips going viral, and I don't know if you've seen them, of Maduro giving speeches and trying to do very basic mental arithmetic sums whilst he's on the podium or delivering a speech to the television and getting them wrong. And they've been clipped and gone viral. So it's quite clear he ain't the brains of the operation. There's other people behind it. And a lot of people think it's his wife.
That's really fascinating to me. I was wondering why they took her. I know a lot of people, you see all the kind of like rumors and suggestions. And
Mm.
one of the things I saw going around was that the fact that they were taken together is proof that it's like they're going into witness protection, essentially. They're going to turn on who knows, and they have information on who knows. But it's fascinating to just hear that she's actually just a ruthless psychopath.
And she's smart, much smarter than him. And a lot of people, we don't know about the veracity of these claims, but more than one person has told me in Venezuela that she's the brains, not him. There was one moment actually, which was in the whole on Friday nights or Saturday mornings events, which were almost funny and very Trump-like. So when Chavez was dying, because he was a man of modesty and modest tastes and modest means, being a good communist, of course he is, of course he was. May God rest his soul. He built a mausoleum for himself, a huge mausoleum in Caracas, so where people could go and pay their respects to the great leader and everything he did for them. Anyway, I don't know under whose orders it was from. I'm guessing it was Trump. They fired a rocket into his mausoleum.
I saw that.
You're
So
like, so, and people, I remember my friend was just saying that he was just, people actually appreciated the gesture, believe it or not.
I
But
believe
just to
it.
go, yeah, but to go back to your original question of where we go from here, Bridget, the honest answer, even though it's the one that is incredibly unsatisfying, is I don't think anybody knows where we go from here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's gotta be weird observing it from abroad as well, because you're also observing the American part of it.
Yeah.
There's this sense that it was liberation, and then there's, even in America, this sense that it's imperial overreach. Where do you kind of fall on that scale?
I don't like, look, you and I are both geriatric millennials. As beautiful a term as that is. Look, we are, we came of age during the Iraq War.
Yeah,
We saw Afghanistan. We saw, the lie, the myth that was WMD, that, that Saddam wanted to build a nuclear weapon. We saw regime change. I actually demonstrated against it. I attended the demonstration, protests in the Iraq War.
yeah.
And then it turned out to be a disaster, and the vast majority of us turned out to be correct. So, on the one hand, on an intellectual level, I am against it. On an
So let me
emotional level, I'm just delighted that bastard is in prison.
Yeah, I think you can hold both those things at the same time, and I, like you, was very much against going into Iraq, and we all saw how that turned out. I will say, I see a lot of people comparing the 2, and I hesitate to do that too, because you had somewhat some kind of democracy 28 years ago there.
Mhm.
You're not talking about the Middle East and thousands of years of religious factions fighting and deeply entrenched. I just feel like they're completely different places.
They are completely
Um,
different places. It's quite a lazy comparison. What you were talking about in countries like Iraq or Afghanistan is you're talking about countries that have never had democracy, that the country is only really established because there's arbitrary lines on the map. There are warring tribes
mhm,
within those countries who hate each other, who represent Sunni Islam or Shia Islam, and as a result, there's almost in a permanent state of civil war. The argument could be made that the only real way to keep a country like that together is to have an autocratic leader. Anything else is just doomed to failure. I don't know
mhm,
if that's true, but that's the argument a lot of people make. No, Venezuela has had the last time we had a dictatorship was in 64. I think 64, 65. Ever since then, we have had democratic elected leaders.
mhm.
We had an election last year where, unfortunately, the election was compromised and then stolen by the ruling party. So
Yeah,
we do have a tradition of democracy. It's very corrupt, unfortunately. But no, we do have a real tradition of democracy. It's not the same, but I mean, who knows? Who knows?
yeah,
The problem is that Venezuela's infrastructure, the cities, the economy, everything is so degraded because of the horrific amounts of corruption, theft that has been happening on an industrial level. It's going to take Venezuela decades to get back to where it once was, let alone be a
yeah.
thriving, prosperous nation.
Yeah, but even that process could be money making, like, for the people. Even
Yeah,
it could theoretically rebuilding infrastructure, making things better, improving. I'm trying to end my I was so black pilled on pretty much everything. Not black pilled, but felt this sense of doom at the end of the year. And now I entered the year and I'm trying to be comfortable with just thinking, well, maybe I think my default is to be like, well, the worst thing is gonna happen, obviously. But that hasn't always been true. You know,
no,
the maybe it ends up being good, but I completely understand, like, the cautious optimism in this moment just because you and I both you're friends with Faisal, right? You
yeah,
guys
yeah,
have
yeah, yeah,
interviewed him.
yeah.
And I always think about what he said after Iraq, how it was good, and then it was actually the power vacuum, like you said, that we left that was filled, and it begs the question, like, did we go far enough?
Hmm.
Did we stay long enough? Should we have done more to stabilize that region? And the weird thing about America, as I've viewed it in my lifetime,
Hmm.
is that it feels like we're ashamed of our power,
Hmm.
and that is a very strange and this administration is decidedly not. They're
Yeah,
absolutely did you see that the conversation between Stephen Miller and Jake Tapper,
no.
where Stephen Miller was going really hard, and he was saying it's, like, well within our right to the he was saying Jake Tapper was saying, "This is a sovereign country. You can't
Hmm.
just go in there and take a leader," and the argument is that it's a failed state, and Russia and China are already there. Why should we allow them to continue to build up their defenses and entrench themselves in our backyard? As and my point too is like, well, ask a sovereign nation, like, how free are the Venezuelans? I don't think they would consider themselves free in that country.
Well, look, this is so.
Sorry, I'm all over the
No,
place.
no, 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 no,
You're the
no, no,
first
no,
you're
no,
the
no,
first
no,
person I get to talk to about
no,
this on
no,
an
no.
intellectual level.
It's a great question. It's a really great question. And the reason it's a great question is because they have talked. The reason Maduro is Trump's argument is the reason Maduro is in prison currently is because of the drugs and narco trafficking. He's in part of a gang called Cartel de los Soles, responsible for a huge amount of cocaine flooding and fentanyl flooding into the United States. Anybody with who follows current affairs or even has half a brain realizes this isn't true. The reality is the Maduro government, and before that the Chavez government, was allied with America's enemies: Russia, China, Iran. Not only was it allied with its enemies, it actively gave two fingers to the American government and to the American state. Hugo Chavez described George W. Bush as like being like a monkey with as dangerous as being as a monkey with a razor blade. That was a famous quote, right? And what is happening now in Venezuela is China are there because of the oil. 4%, around 4% of Chinese oil comes from Venezuela.
Mhm.
Iran has Hezbollah training camps in Venezuela.
That's
So you have
crazy.
literal terrorist training camps
It's so crazy.
in Venezuela. There is an island called Margarita Island, which is a beautiful Caribbean island off the coast of Venezuela. It's a Venezuelan island. And I was talking to my cousin who lives out there, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" He was like, "Well, we've got Hezbollah training camps." And you go, "This is an island about an hour and 45 minutes away by plane from America."
Yeah.
You, so you have that. Then on top of that, in 2015, so here's a little bit of background. The country next to Venezuela is called Guyana or Guyana. It depends how you pronounce it. Guyana is a former British colony. It's now an
Yeah.
independent state. Guyana and Venezuela have always been at loggerheads over a region of the Guyanese country, of a part of the Guyanese country, a territory of Guyana, effectively. 2015, oil was found in this territory, one of the largest deposits of oil in the world. Pretty soon, Venezuela started saber rattling. Maduro started saber rattling, saying that territory was effectively Venezuela's. It was belongs to Venezuela. The oil belongs to Venezuela. We are going to take it. And he started to do things like distributing maps of Venezuela to the schools with this new territory included in it. He then did an election, I think it was in 2024, asking the Venezuelan people whether they wanted to invade and take back Guyana. And according to his polls, I'm sure they were legit, 92% of Venezuelans agreed. Bear in mind, this is a population that can't eat. And what, they're going to
Right.
pick up a rifle and go and fight? It was completely nonsensical. But what you essentially had, as like I mentioned before, is you had a leader working with your enemies, hosting your enemies, giving, and we haven't talked about this, about the Cuba connection, but
Yeah.
also threatening your allies and threatening American companies who are going to be going to Guyana and extracting oil. The situation was becoming untenable as far as the Americans go, and it was happening in their literal backyard.
Yeah, this is something I think a lot about in light of the recent days, and just as you and I have been covering the culture now for, gosh, a decade,
Mhm.
which is crazy, over a decade,
Yeah,
and it does, I was saying this on Dumpster Fire, people are like, "They people didn't elect Trump for this." I'm like, but they did, because even if they don't realize why they elected him, we had war in Ukraine, war in Gaza and Israel going on and during Biden, and we had balloons from China flying overhead, like
yeah.
over America. And it didn't seem like, and then you have this kind of Europe being completely lost to Islam. and nobody really wanting to talk about it or admit it, or
Mhm.
anything that's going on there it seems like it gets buried. And I don't know, it feels like when people are in that situation, they're going to elect someone they feel is stronger if they're feeling uncertain, and I just don't think Kamala is a strong enough leader to put people's minds at ease.
Completely agree. If you look at everything that happened on Biden's watch, the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan, what October the 7th, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, people naturally think to themselves, would this have happened under Trump's watch? And the reality is, I don't think it would do. You look at what he's done to Venezuela, and people go, oh, Trump's all talk, he's all bluster. You can't say that anymore. He's not all
Yeah.
talk, he's not all bluster. So when he then turns around and says to the Colombian president, you better fix up and you better do what we're asking you to do. And the drug situation that is happening in Colombia, it needs to get sorted pronto. Otherwise, similar things could happen. People are going, well, hang on a second. He's done it with Maduro, so why wouldn't he do it with us? And then you have the other side of it, which is the Greenland situation, where people, he's saying that, Greenland needs to belong to America. And then every fiber of your being is going, for the love of God, please don't do that, because that belongs to an EU country. I mean, what if that happens? We truly are in unprecedented times. And I know we always say that unprecedented times. It's like a hack. It's hack. It's a hack comment to make. But I mean, what else would you describe it as if he
Yeah.
takes over Greenland?
Now he's saying he wants to buy it?
I don't know. I don't know. I just we are it hack comment again through the looking glass, but I can't remember for the life of me in my 43 years on this planet looking at America and what they did with Maduro. I can't remember. Maybe I'm not remembering far back enough, but that to me seems pretty unprecedented. Really does.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not standard operating procedures
Yeah.
in terms of our life. Although, I will say I would consider more of an operation, and there have been many operations in
Mm.
my lifetime. Even under Obama, they went in
Yeah.
and they killed Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of operations where they've gone in and taken out, someone that was a bad guy. I
Yeah.
just don't know that it was quite like the leader of a country in
Yeah.
the sense that, we had Soleimani, that was an operation. So, yeah, it's really fascinating too because I don't often think about what the world looks like in 30 years, 50 years.
Mm.
And if you are wargaming like these guys do, all of them at the top, the geopolitical
Mm.
strategies that are constantly going on, and you have Russia and you've got China and then you've got the United States and these world powers kind of battling for market share and also just power. And then Islam, which is kind of just like insidiously taking over everywhere.
Hmm.
You I don't know what decisions would need to be made to, like, shore up your defenses.
Well, the problem is in Europe, we have been living in this kind of daydream world where we're like, oh, war is never going to happen again. Particularly in Europe, there was one of the facts that was taught on every economics course in every university in the UK was that, oh, there's never been a war between two countries who had a McDonald's.
Right.
Because this idea, that we're going to trade with everybody, and trade brings wealth and prosperity, and that means that people aren't going to want to fight each other because they have money. Well, unfortunately, the events of 2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, put paid to that little theory. And I think what people are rapidly realizing now is that the world is changing, and
Right.
it's changing pretty quickly. And it's not about international law, and it's not about sovereign nations and all of these lovely ideas that we used to keep us warm in the night, and when we were in, when living in the liberal Western countries. The reality is it's about strength. Who's
Yeah.
the strongest? Who's got the most money? Who's got the biggest, most powerful armed forces? And they're the ones who are in control. And everybody else is going to fall in line behind whichever superpower they think will serve them best and will protect them best.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
America is the world's #1 superpower. And if you compare it to Russia or China, I mean, where would you prefer to live?
Yeah.
America ain't perfect, but I'd rather live in America than I would in Beijing. And by the way, I've been to Beijing. I wouldn't want to live in under the CCP rule.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where
Yeah.
we are. That's where we are as a society. Unpleasant, or as a world, unpleasant as it may seem. It's about strength. It's about money. It's about power.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah, yeah. And all I think that we're seeing is reverting back to the way things always were. I think after World War II, we had the post World War II order where you know things calmed down, and then the collapse of communism, and the end of history, and we're going to look forward to this new ultra liberal world where everybody's going to be progressive and believe in democracy. And Condoleezza Rice and the rest of the neocons fell for this particular myth when you look at Iraq and Afghanistan, and that we're going to bring them democracy. That's demented. It's utterly demented. And the reality is, it's not. It's about strength. It's about power. It's about money. It's about resources. And Trump and the Americans are now understand that. Well, America always understood that, but he is open about it, and he's not sugarcoating it. And that's perhaps the shocking thing, is that it's not being sugarcoated anymore.
But is that I mean, is it a bad thing to display power? This is what I mean about living in an America that's almost been, like, apologetic about
Yeah.
our power. It's I don't think it's been good for the country internally. So what I've seen is just an overall people just they're the own our own citizens hate America. You
Yeah.
know, they there's and this has been obviously we've covered this, you and I, ad
Hmm.
nauseum over the past decade, taught to these kids in schools, often by foreign countries who have
Yeah.
invested in these programs, trying to undermine America and sow dissent and and this kind of self-loathing. And I see this in Europe too. This weird the Western self-loathing is so more destructive than almost anything to liberty. And that is something that I've spent a lot of time contemplating. And I don't know how you, because on a personal level,
Hmm.
I've dealt with this just as someone who is an addict and someone who made mistakes and we've had a bad run of being in places we probably didn't belong from Vietnam. World War II is probably the last time people were proud of a war that
Hmm.
was won for reasons they felt were moral and righteous. And ever since then, it's been more of a decline. And then you have the imperial sensibility, and there's all this self-loathing that comes with that. And I don't know that self-loathing is helpful
Well, I don't think it's helpful,
on a
Bridget.
personal or a national level.
Because, and I find, as somebody who has had his own journey with alcohol, I find the addiction way of looking at this very, very powerful and very, very interesting. Because what self-loathing is what every addict feels at a certain point in their life, and what self-loathing eventually leads to is self-destruction. where you
Shame.
where
Yeah.
you loathe yourself to the point that you feel that the world would be a better place without you in it.
Mhm.
And that's when things start to get really dark. And what we've done with a whole generation of children and young people is we've taught them that actually the world would be a much better place without Western nations, without white people, without all of these things. That we are the most evil. We are we're kind of the original sin of the world. We invented slavery and all of this stuff, which is obviously bollocks, because slavery has been around as long as human beings have.
Mhm.
And I think that look, I mean, it's so bad that people in this country go, what has Britain contributed to the world? And they go, Britain hasn't contributed anything to the world. And you go, are you mental? Like, let's take the argument about whether we're evil and put it to one side. How can you say the Brits haven't contributed anything? What, you've never listened to music, you've never read a book, you
Yeah.
know, you everything that we've contributed, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I think people need to realize and they need to wake up, because if you think no society is perfect, America has got some very serious flaws, like every culture does, just as the Brits do, just like every nation. But I tell you what, I'd much rather live in Minnesota than I would in Caracas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe the feeling that I have of it being kind of the I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime unless they figure out how to make it so that we can't die, which they might. But it does feel like the death of the West. You know, Douglas Murray's
Mhm.
been way ahead of the curve on this stuff in Europe, and he's been talking right about this for as long as I've been aware of him. And it starts obviously on that personal level. This is that thing of politics being downstream of culture. You
Yeah.
basically trained an entire generation to hate America, hate Europe, hate the West, hate the values. You've seen the polls of the young people who don't believe in free speech. They don't there's no sense of these things, and in the we had the benefit of having grandparents who fought
Hmm.
in World War II. So we were living in the shadow of World War II, whether we were aware of that at the time or not. And now I look at 2 generations down from me, and they don't really even have any respect for free speech. And it's interesting that it's like the America's 250th birthday, because
Hmm.
it does feel like a moment where we should reclaim a little bit of the national pride. And then even I bristle at this kind of sense of nationalism,
Hmm.
national
Yeah.
it's just historically nationalism doesn't usually, that doesn't usually roll in the right direction. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Completely.
I don't really know how to like process, because I had the benefit of living in this post World War II kind of, whatever we lived in, the good the peak of Western civilization, perhaps. We don't I don't know how to process everything that's unfolding always.
I'll be honest. I don't think I do either. I think we've entered a very kind of strange time where,
But I
and we have to be fair to young people as well. We have to be
yeah,
fair to them, and we have to admit, and we have to be honest that they've been screwed over. They have
yeah,
been royally screwed over. They've been screwed over by the boomers. They've been screwed over by the system. Just look at COVID. What was COVID? But COVID was a system that was brought in to deal with the pandemic, which essentially prioritized the old over the young. I
yeah,
don't think I've ever seen a society where that has happened,
yeah.
where people are treating the old and saying they're more important than the future of society.
Yeah, I think yes, fair to the young, although I don't think they realize, you said something that's gonna stick with me a lot, which is that when the poor Venezuelans felt resentful
Mm,
and like they weren't getting theirs, which is a very similar feeling to what you're describing in America, particularly amongst the youth. They elected someone and it got much worse. And I
yeah.
think there is this there is something I need to remember because there's just a general lack of gratitude in everywhere, but
Hmm.
in America, and it can always get worse. This is something I am highly aware of, and I actually, my husband points out, kind of default to being more like catastrophic in my thinking. It's something I have to push against. Perhaps it's from my crazy upbringing, whatever
Mm,
you want to attribute it to. It's just my default, but I I do have to remember, and I hope young people realize that
mm,
yes, maybe it isn't fair, but ushering in, populism and then socialism on the heels of it, which we are seeing
yeah.
shades of in New
Mm.
York, for example, the beginnings is not, I don't think that's going to make anything better either.
It's not. It's not. Socialism has been proven to fail wherever it's been tried. The thing that makes me, I'll touch on this and I'll get back to your point, really bitter about what happened with Venezuela is when Chavez came to power in the first few years, the Bernie Sanders, the Jeremy Corbyns, the Owen Jones, who's a very prominent left wing journalist in the UK, came out and said Venezuela was the future. This is how socialism should be done. This proves that socialism works. And then it collapsed, and relatives of mine were thrown into prison. One of my cousins is a journalist. He bled for his life because he got a knock on the door from one of the colectivos who said, You've got two options. You keep talking, you're going to jail, and you don't know when you'll be back, if you're back, or you leave. And none of them ever apologized. None of them ever said that they were sorry for championing the regime. And to anybody who might be listening to this or watching this and thinking to yourself, socialism and hard left politics or even hard right politics is perhaps a solution to the problems that we face as a society. I would just ask you to pick up a history book and read about every society that embraced these terrible ideas and what happened to them.
Yeah.
The people in Germany were struggling, the economic collapse, hyperinflation. They embraced fascism. What happened to them? It got worse.
Yeah.
It actually got worse. Much, much, much worse. You look at Venezuela, deeply unfair, corrupt. There was a racial element as well, which I haven't mentioned. But it's worse now. It's much worse now than it was in 1998.
I mean,
So what
some
do
would
you want?
argue that's happening in America.
With Zoran,
No, with Trump.
with Trump, yeah.
The entire left would listen to this interview and say, "Why can't these idiots see what's happening in America? It's the same thing." That would be their argument.
That would be their argument. I think the argument that always wins is the middle. It's the moderate. It's the center. But embracing ideas from the center, more moderate ideas, you need to have a maturity that comes with it, which is it ain't ever going to be perfect.
Mhm.
If life is always going to be unfair, the world is flawed, it's broken. All of these things are true. But what would you prefer as a whole, as a complete package? What would you prefer? To live in America in 2026 or to live in Venezuela or to live in
Right.
under Nazi Germany? Because you pick extreme ideas, you're going to end up in extreme places. And you don't want that. You really
T
don't.
Talk to me about Cuba too, because you mentioned that, and I don't wanna lose that thread, speaking of extreme ideas
Okay.
in communism.
So so Cuba is it's so Cuba was ruled by a leader called Allende, and he was overthrown. There was a lot of anger in Cuba at the time, but by a communist revolution, because Cuba was seen as el burdel de los gringos, which means the brothel of the Americans. Americans would go over to Cuba, they would drink, they would fuck, they would do, and they would behave in a way that is maybe we could say not slightly arrogant, putting it mildly, putting it very mildly. So Chavez came to power in '99. And when he came to power, it was partly it was done with the Cubans. And what Chavez did is he provided Cuba with cheap oil and petroleum, which helped to keep Cuba afloat because Cuba is always about 24 hours away from going bankrupt. People live in
Mhm.
poverty there. It's terrible. And then what Venezuela got in return was the military. But more important than the military and the boots on the ground was the technical know how to turn a democratic nation into a communist country, authoritarian regime. And he was very close with Castro, and that's what they did. They that's what Cuba provided. You could see Cuban soldiers on the streets of Caracas. You could see, they also provided medics, and they made a big deal about this. Cuban medics came over. But Venezuela essentially became a puppet state for the Cuban government, and they Venezuela helped keep Cuba afloat financially, and Cuba kept Chavez's government in power and their stranglehold over the Venezuelan people, and that's how it worked for many many years. Still
Yeah,
works
I
now.
mean, even when you hear about this mission that they went on, it was like he was being guarded by 33 Cubans or something like that.
Hmm. In fact, when he was getting treated for stomach cancer, he didn't go to the United States, he didn't go to Switzerland, he didn't even go to Russia. He went to Cuba. He was treated by Cuban doctors. So that was a level of connection that the two, that these two countries have enjoyed. And it's really fascinating when you look at Cuba and you look at the size of Cuba and you look at the size of Venezuela and the difference when it comes to wealth. The fact that this island is essentially in charge, that's got its
Yeah,
grip in Venezuela, it's almost beyond belief, really.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But is this Russian influence? I mean, it's hard to tell. Wasn't the leader, the current leader who's now in charge in Russia when all of this went down?
So that I don't know, but there have always been very strong ties between Chavez's government and the Russians. There have
Yeah,
always been very strong ties
and
between
Cuba, I
Chavez,
think, and the
eh,
Russians.
yeah, Cuba and the Russians for a long time, and also the Chinese. So these kind of hard left communist policies and doctrines, they have been implemented in Venezuela, but obviously they have come from Cuba and originally from Russia itself.
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and that's where we are, and that's where the people are now. Obviously, Russia is doing much better than Cuba or Venezuela. It's moved beyond communism. It's still an authoritarian country, but it's far more open and capitalist. Same with China, actually. China is
Yeah,
rapidly becoming one of the richest nations in the world. And again, if you go to Beijing, I mean, I went to Beijing nearly 20 years ago now. It is the most capitalist nation on earth. You go into the shopping malls there. I went to a shopping mall and I saw a Louis Vuitton store which was about the size of an IKEA. It
yeah,
was incredible. It was like floor after floor after floor of extremely expensive designer goods. And
yeah,
people were going in there and dropping thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars like it was nothing.
yeah.
So, in a way, China and Russia, they're obviously using them, but they're more, they're much better run and they're much more financially liberal than Venezuela or Cuba.
W It's we have to wrap up soon, but I do wanna talk about one of our mutual common loves, which is humor. And I will say that the translate feature on X for the past couple of days is amazing. And being able to see the dark humor coming from Venezuelan Twitter is, I mean, I hope they don't all end up in jail from it, but it has been hilarious. They have the darkest sense of humor, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. The Venezuelan humor is super dark.
It's so funny though. Some
It
of the
is.
stuff.
Yeah, it's so dark. It's the they call it the Venezuelan diet, which is how you there's no fat people anymore in Venezuela. I remember one of my uncles complaining he couldn't lose weight. I mean, and when I was talking to my cousins about it, I'm like, "Oh, how is he?" My cousin went, "He's losing weight now." And he goes, say what you like about communism, it cured his diabetes and saved his toes. So, but I think that that's one of the amazing things about the human being is that when you are facing those types of awful situations, and one of the things that does keep you going is the sense of humor, is the ability to make jokes, is to be able to laugh about it. And Venezuelans are amazing people. I remember talking to a friend who was going to me. Oh, we went to a party. I can't remember where it was. He was like, "Wasn't that a great party?" And I was like, "Nah." He was like, "What do you mean? That's the best party we've ever been to." I was like, "Yeah, for Britain, it's a good party." He was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "You've never been to a Venezuelan party. They are the most warm, loving, open, kind people that you could ever hope to meet." And I remember going to, especially Venezuela during Christmas time, the parties, the celebrations. It's a Latin country.
Yeah.
It's completely different in culture to what we experience in the UK. Even in Europe, even in Spain or Italy, it's a different level. And all I can hope for is that, and this goes for every Venezuelan, that we hopefully will be able to go back to those times because there's the word for hope in Spanish is esperanza. And the first part of that word is esperar, which means to wait. And Venezuelans have been waiting for a long time now. They've been waiting. There's a huge migrant population, refugee population, whatever you want to call it, have been waiting to come home. There's the Venezuelan population in Venezuela who are waiting to be liberated. And there's just a whole swathe of people who just want this regime gone so that they can carry on with their lives and be able to live in peace and stability and freedom, which is what we take for granted in the West. And I would
Yeah.
say to anybody who takes, what we have here for granted, or feels resentful, or feels angry, and thinks that things aren't, or feels that things aren't fair, and of course they're not fair because nothing ever is. It could always be worse, and
Yeah.
if you embrace these ideas, this is inevitably where you end up.
You've described yourself as a comic with skin in the game, and I love that. What does that mean to you?
It means that you talk about the things that matter, the things that are important. Like, and I've got nothing, by the way, against observational comics. I have a friend, a guy called Sean Walsh, he's a UK comic. He's a brilliant observational comic. He does, comedy about what it's like to put jam on your toast in the morning, does 5 minutes, and it's hilariously funny, and he's brilliant at it. But I think for me, I want to talk about things that matter. I write sketches about, I'm doing a lot of sketches at the moment. I write about the police force in the UK. I write about where the UK is going. I talk about, every Hollywood actor when they found out that a ceasefire had been declared in Gaza, and the hypocrisy, because I want to talk about things that I feel matter, because I think that's where humor is at its best and its most vital. So I guess, yeah, I guess that is to have skin in the game. So that's, I guess, why I call it that.
That's what's so crazy too, the whiplash from going, like, people from the No Kings protest to protesting the removal of a literal dictator or freeing Palestine to now you don't wanna free these people from the conditions that they're in. That's really where get tripped up on a lot of the like American Western activists where there just doesn't seem to be there's dead silence about Iran. It just there doesn't seem to be like a consistent through line of just liberty for people.
Well, it's because, Bridget, when you start engaging, look, it's very easy to parrot slogans, free Palestine, nobody's free until all of us are free, whatever the fuck that means. And we know the rest of the other slogans. But when you start engaging with issues in reality, what you start realizing pretty quickly is the reason these issues haven't been solved and they've festered for years, decades, centuries, millennia is because it's really complex and difficult. And maybe there aren't any easy solutions, or maybe even worse than that, maybe there aren't any solutions.
Mhm.
Maybe there aren't any solutions at all, and this is just how it is. I'm not saying that's the truth, I'm just putting it out there as a hypothetical. And it's much easier to download an ideology, whatever the ideology is, whether it's neoconservatism, whether it's fascism, whether it's hyperliberalism, wokeism, progressivism, whatever you want to call it, because it means that you don't have to think for yourself, that you don't have to challenge yourself in order to engage honestly with what is actually happening in the world, with these issues, with these problems, with these challenges. Because the reality is, if these problems were so easy and simple, they would have been solved years ago by people much smarter and more competent than both of us. And the reality is that they're difficult. And by tackling them honestly, you've got to realize that it ain't slogans and it ain't
Yeah.
chants and it's got to be something else. And there's always going to be trade offs and there's always going to be a loser and there's always going to be a winner and it's not going to be fair. And the reality is that's just life.
Yeah. What's your biggest defect of character?
My biggest defect of character? Oh, so many. God. Uh if I don't look after myself, and the addicty side of me comes out, nihilism,
Yeah.
self-destruction, um,
Nihilism is a big one for me too. Oof.
yeah. If I don't sleep, if I don't eat right, if I don't go to the gym, if things start going awry, if I don't meditate, if I don't become grateful, if I don't do gratitude lists of all of these things,
I know.
I can go pretty dark pretty quickly. And
Uh,
it's self-destructive nihilism, I'd say it's for me, and resentment and anger, just when the darkness descends.
yeah, yeah. Yep. I always envy people who don't wake up with that. One of the
Yeah.
things that was the hardest thing when I got sober was having to be I was like, "Why don't people?" I just feel like I wake up so far behind the 8 ball, like, in order to even get to where a lot of people just wake up, I've gotta
Yeah.
do all the things you just listed, like, "Oh, I've gotta meditate and do a fucking gratitude list and, then be grateful for the gratitude list," and it just
Do you never
feels,
think do you never think that's just your Irish genes?
maybe.
I've got like I remember talking to this Irishman, and I was in San Francisco, and then everyone was like, "Oh, I think this guy's kind of depressed. He's a little bit angry." I'm like, "It's just Irish,
It's
you know."
funny you say that. I was talking to Colin Quinn when I was opening for him,
Mm.
and I had a good set, and then he's like, "You had a great set. You're worried." And I'm like, "Well, now I'm really worried." He's like, "Yeah, 'cause you're Irish." He's
You
he's
know,
like, "You're Irish, so you can never let yourself, like, feel too good."
that is so true. It's the
It's
Irish
so true.
Catholic. It's Richard Harris, the very famous actor, had a saying. He was like, "The Irish only drink when they're unhappy," and he went, "But then again, whenever you ever met a happy Irishman,
Yeah. What is your biggest asset?
I just keep fucking going." You know, like
Yeah.
it's so interesting because you know this from comedy. You know, you do terrible rooms, you go, you and you're grinding it, and it's a pretty miserable existence. You're like, why am I doing this? Am I deluded? Am I insane? Have I got some kind of personality disorder? Yes, you have, but let's not focus too much on that and keep going. And then you have your moments of success and whatever it may be, or however it comes to you. And then people go, "Oh, you're brilliant, and you're just what you do is amazing," and you're like, "Nah, I just kept going.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just kept going.
Resistance. Yep.
That's it. I think that's most of life. And if anybody who's listening to this is in a moment which is bad, like just keep going, just keep going.
That's
It will
we
change.
literally sell T-shirts that say that at Phetasy because
Really,
it's been my mantra forever. Just keep going. Like,
just keep.
I'll look at Maggie and I'll be like, "Well, what do we do?" You know, we have like, "What do we do?" And we'll look at each other and we'll be like, "Just keep going." Like, there's no other alternative.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be. There's a type, and I know that you get this in the US. There's a type of comedian. You'll see them in the comedy clubs. They've been doing the same set for 20 years. They've got that vacant, dead look in their eye. And they just go out and trot out the same lines they've done year after year. And I have an empathy for those people because you go in a different way, maybe a different timeline. That could have been me or whatever else. But you just look at them and you go, you just got to keep going, and
Yeah.
you just can't give up. And even though sometimes, waking up, like I woke up today, didn't really sleep well, feeling whatever I was feeling, you just go, no, meditate, get up out of bed, go for a walk, do the stuff, and it'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get
Have
better.
you read Stephen Pressfield's Art of War?
No,
The War of Art. Sorry, The War of Art.
no.
It's so good. You have to read it. It's very short, but he
Yeah,
talks about how as artists, you have to accept that every day you're going to wake up with resistance and it will start shattering the minute you open your eyes, and you have to just go sit your ass in the chair and do the work, or get up and just keep going, basically. But recognize that, like, you have this enemy and it is resistance, and your job is to overcome that every day. And once I kind of recognize that, now I can wake up and go, I don't feel this way, I don't feel that way, and I go I woke up at 6:30, I did my writing before this podcast, and I just was tired, and like, you didn't have a good night's sleep, the kid was kind of restless last night, and I was like, get up, get your ass in that chair, sit
yeah,
there for the hour that you said you're gonna sit there. Even if you write 300 words, it's still just that battle. It's just a battle. Where can
yeah.
we find you?
Uh, if you find me, so my show is called Triggernometry. I also have my own YouTube show, which is a light, fun comedy show called Francis Foster Sorts Your Life Out, which is just fun and
It
lovely.
is fun.
And on socials, Francis J. Foster, I do loads of satirical comedy sketches. In fact, tomorrow I'm recording a comedy sketch as the new president of Venezuela. So we're going to
Oh,
record that.
great.
Yeah, yeah, with my assistant Ramon.
Amazing.
Yeah,
We'll look forward to that. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for checking in with me and last minute coming on and talking about Venezuela from perspective of someone who actually knows the country and the people and the struggle and all of it. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on, Bridget. It's been a blast as always.
Hopefully by the time this launches in like a week, it hasn't descended into civil war.
Yeah, and then we'll be back doing another podcast.
Yeah,
Please.
exactly. Then we'll just be
Yeah.
like, well, we've got to live stream this one.
And yeah, live stream. Oh God. Yeah, let's hope not.
Okay. Have a good day. Love
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
Thank
Cheers. You
you.
too. Bye.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.